Hello everyone and welcome once again to the Human Race page. Just as I promised you in our last post, I'm going to tell you about a story of what I call violence transformed. A young man who found his ecstatic point while being in a very rough, tough way of life in prison. But before I do that, I want to explain the purpose of this video. I want to show you that 20,000 years ago, or somewhere around that, give or take a few thousand, the ancient Egyptians, during the age of character, had found their ecstatic point quite naturally. They weren't taught about a so-called ecstatic point. They simply naturally fell into it over a period of social work, many hundreds of years of working together for the benefit of each and all. Every person lived by a simple philosophy: do only that which makes the entire society love you. Because their concept of God was not a religious concept. It was a concept that all things were made for good of all things, including humanity. Therefore, man was very good. This idea of living good because you are good led on and on to highly enlightened poetry, beautiful creations, and a sense that you belong and there is a purpose to your life. You are here to give your special talents to all of humanity, not just for money, not just for self-satisfaction, because to these people there was no individual self. We know this because of the way they would write their poetry. They would simply put one name on there. They did not have a first and last name. No one did. There was just an individual name. Intuition was at its highest at that time. People worked together for the benefit of everyone. Great and wonderful sculptures and paintings and literature came from the age of character in ancient Egypt. This was long before the pyramids were built. Now to my story. I was working in a prison doing electrical work on the outside of what they call the wall. This prison at that time had several acres of farmland, and the inmates were, some of them were in a trustee situation where they could be trusted to work the farmland. Some worked in the cattle, others in the pigs, and still yet others in the grain and the field work. Occasionally, a group of them would sit down and have lunch with us outside. Now, there were a few guards around, yet they were not so deeply concerned because these guys, like I say, were trustees. Some of them had been quite violent, and some of them still were if they were bothered any at all. There was this one particular day when I was kind of giving one of my talks. I was practicing speeches in those days. And I was talking about the values of meditation. And the young man, there was a group of about 10, maybe 12 or so inmates. One of them handed a gray-looking piece of paper, just a square of paper, to this other man, and he looked at it and acted like he was quite inspired by it. He passed it on and on and on, and I didn't know what was written on it, but it sure was interesting. When it got down to me, I looked at it, and it was this beautiful sea painting. The ocean was a beautiful sea green, dark in areas, and there was these white-capped ocean waves, very gray skies and lightning. It was a storm at sea, and there was a sailboat and you could see just the little figures on there. You could tell those guys were terrified by this tremendous storm tossing their boat around like a little cork. I noticed it was a painting done in watercolors. However, the whitecaps were done three-dimensionally. I asked, who painted this? This young man, who everyone sort of suggested he was kind of a really mean bully type guy, said, well, I did, with a sense of pride on his face. I said, wow, that is tremendously beautiful work. He thanked me. I began to ask him how much practice time he put in. Oh, an hour now and then. He said, it gives me a sense that I forget that I'm in the prison. That's why I mainly do that. I said, how'd you make those three-dimensional white caps on the ocean waves? He said, I just used acrylic paint. I said, I never thought about doing two mediums of paint to create such an effect. That is beautiful work. The lightning looked so real, and the storm clouds were formed just perfect. I asked him how long he had been painting, and he said not that long. He said they had a class, painter's class, that he would attend once a week, and that he couldn't afford much because you had to buy your own supplies there. He said, I take toilet paper rolls and cut one side in half, and he said, I wet them and spread them out, and I let them dry. And he said, when they dry with the weight on them, he said it makes a good piece for me to paint white, and then I put a scene over the white. And he said it's fun to do. I then began to tell him about my experience as a student of the classic guitar. I told him my teacher, Mr. Baxley, taught me that 3 hours a day of practice over a period of time would make me into a master musician. What Mr. Baxley did not tell me was that if I did that, I would fall in love in it and I would find my ecstatic point, which I did do. I told him that if you begin to practice and love it the way you do, you will fall into this flow, this inspired thing. I did with my music, and if you do, you can release yourself mentally from this prison and make a master out of yourself, so that when you get out of prison, jobs will be seeking masters. Masters don't look for work. They express themselves and work finds them. You see, the ecstatic point is in every one of us, just as it was the ancient Egyptians. We don't have to depend upon what we were taught. Anytime you see beauty, you have found your ecstatic point. But if you desire it through using meditation techniques, you desire the light within you, it will come. Just depends upon how much you want to put into it. And that's the purpose of this video. This young man later came up missing. I asked, where's he at? No one knew. He just doesn't come out of the pen anymore. He was putting in long hours. About 4 months later, after I had a good long talk with him, he came out on the field and let me know how much he appreciated the little talk we had. He said it changed his life. He said he found something in his painting that releases him from prison every day. His life was much more peaceful. He spends most of his time looking for pictures to paint in catalogs and books in the prison library. Later, he was transferred to a low-security prison. I'm sure that young man went on to build his life wonderfully and ecstatically, as I encourage everyone to do. It makes no difference what you believe about God. If you still believe God is a faraway entity, go ahead. You're going to anyway. But the practice, the doing, the seeking of the light within through meditation is what's most important. Thank you so much. I'll see you Friday on, I believe it's the Patterns and Change page, where we'll take the seesaw of life apart and examine the very center of our ecstatic point. Thank you. Have a wonderful week and see you then. Bye-bye.